morning, everyone. Welcome to Brooks Memorial Library. My name is Tara O'Brien, and I do outreach and programming here at the library for you all. And if there's any kind of programming that you do want, please let us know. You'll see on your chair there's a feedback form. So at the end of the program, please let us know what you liked about the program, how you learned about the program, and maybe some comments about what more you'd like to have at the library. Because we listen to your feedback. Thank you very much, as I'm listening to my friend out there cueing me. So if there's anything you do want to see at the library, please let us know. And I'm just going to run through some logistics for tonight. The emergency exits are the one that you may have came through in the front, and then right here into the alley. That's our second emergency exit. The bathroom is down the hall under the green sign right here. There are refreshments for intermission, or after the question and the answers tonight. And I'm really, really, really happy to be here tonight for this program. If you are at the Brattleboro Literary Festival, Deborah Lee Luskin came and spoke to us and gave us a sneak peek of what she was going to present tonight. And it was really, really inspiring to hear her speak to our audience that day. And we hope that you enjoy her program tonight. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to our director, Star Latronica.
Oh my goodness, I love this town. I love that on a Friday night, we're all here together in the library. So I met Deborah Lee Luskin the very first week I was here. She was up there on the mezzanine working away at a laptop. And that encounter was yet another affirmation of just the amazing cauldron of creativity that is this community. Over the years, I followed Deborah and got to know her through her writing, through her VPR pieces, through her work in the Commons. And then I learned that she had spent over 35 years driving all over Vermont, writing and delivering literature-based programming to all kinds of folks, from educators to parenting teens to healthcare workers and to people who are incarcerated. I learned that her first novel, Into the Wilderness, won the Independent Publishers Gold Medal for regional fiction. But then I read Reviving Artemis, and I really got to know her. And reading this memoir, who here has already read it? So much fun, right? And the rest of you are in for such a treat. Reading this memoir was such a rich and vivid experience. I felt as though Deborah had personally invited me along on her adventures. But I didn't have to camp out, and I didn't have to get cold. However, I also didn't get to eat really good chocolate and drink bourbon with her, but yeah, someday maybe. She also introduced me really deeply to the culture of hunting and hunters. And I've known hunters all my life. I grew up in the Midwest. I spent 2 years in upstate New York, and now I live in Vermont, where I have venison in my freezer, thanks to our friend and neighbor Ken. But I hadn't really kept company with them in the woods. With Reviving Artemis, I was able to do that, and it was good company indeed. And thank you all for coming and being good company, and thank you, Deborah Lee Luskin.
Thank you for being here, and this is just amazing. Yeah, I want to thank Tara and Star for that, and also Jean Walsh, who's not here, but
Deborah, you have to stay right close to
right close to mine.
No
Yeah.
one can hear it.
Okay. Hello. And I want to thank Anne and everyone's books, and thank you for supporting independent bookstores and independently published work and independent thought. It's all very important. So I'm going to tell you a little about writing the book tonight, and with reading a few sections in between. And let's start with the question I know you all have on your mind. Why would a 60-year-old woman who had never been involved in a hunting family, tradition, culture, had never held a rifle or shot one, any kind of gun, except a cap gun, a long time ago, and go out and learn how to hunt? The short answer is I wanted to learn how to read the landscape. I wanted to find my own way through the woods. The long answer is about 280 pages. And there's also, obviously you probably all can figure out the metaphor. Excuse me, let me just drop my things here. That finding my own way, making my own path. I had done all the things I was supposed to do. I got educated, I got married, I had children, I worked, I supported my family in ways, paid and unpaid. And but what was I going to do about aging? I was taught about menarche, heard awful things about menopause, which I don't think were true, for me anyway, but nobody talked about aging except like, And I wanted to find a way to age. Find my own path towards aging. So in the woods, why not? And when I started the project, I knew I would write about it, because that's how I make sense of the world, is by writing. But I didn't know that writing about my 5 years of learning to hunt would force me to examine my childhood, my family of origin, my learned belief that boys were better than girls, which is actually not true. I know better now. And so tonight I'm going to read you 4 chapters. It's a total of about 20 minutes of reading, but they'll be broken up, and there will be time, even though we're starting late, where there will be time for questions and answers, right? And then I'll be over signing books. So that's the program. I'm going to start at the beginning. I'm already thirsty. Excuse me. I won't be able to talk about it. I was at the Boston Book Festival, I think it was a week ago, and talked for 8 hours outdoors, and so that's why my voice is not quite where I'd like it to be. Okay, so this is how it starts. This is the unlikely story of a woman born in mid-20th-century post-war America into a suburban tribe that hunts for bargains and houses, of people who navigate highways around large urban centers, a clan who think game means tennis, baseball, and parcheesi. Even though all 3 of my brothers earned merit badges for marksmanship as Boy Scouts, I'm the one in my family who owns a rifle, sits in the woods, and waits for game. As a suburban kid and an urban young adult, I'd been a downhill skier. Early in my Vermont life, I switched to cross-country skis, walked on dirt roads, hiked on blazed paths, and grew peas, tomatoes, and squash. When I turned 60, I hiked the length of Vermont on the Long Trail, the oldest recreational footpath in the United States. But I wanted to step off the groomed trails into backcountry wilderness. Without knowing where I was headed all this time, I felt a force pulling me beyond the tamed landscape of recreation and agriculture into the untracked woods. But how would I navigate without written trail signs? I don't remember where or when I heard the answer, but it came through loud and clear. Learn from the deer. Some of the most astute naturalists and conservationists I know are traditional Vermont deer hunters who not only know how to navigate through the forested landscape, they know how to be still and observe. But these men grew up in the woods, noticing the interconnections between the deer's habits and habitat since boyhood. while I've been playing hopscotch on the sidewalk in front of my house or building cardboard homes for my trolls indoors. In adolescence, I read 19th century novels about lonely girls, pursued literature in college, and learned geographical navigation on Manhattan's signposted grid. From literature, I learned to read human behavior, but I didn't know how to read the land. At 60, I had nothing to lose. My 3 daughters were grown, my marriage intact, my fertility complete. I was no longer tugged by the moon. I was now in tune with the sun. Being unmoored from the tides of fertility was profound. After years of cycles that buffeted my body with tears and desire, I was now above treeline, my mind clear. This annual rhythm is slower than the lunar tide that once ruled me. The solar rhythm allows me a deeper experience of the seasons and a longer view, both backwards into the lived past and forward toward death. It's from this vantage point that I see how insignificant I am within the vastness of the natural world. Or maybe I'm just willing to take risks I wouldn't have taken before I became aware that my time's finite. It will run out. Either way, I feel liberated in the face of death, as if this is my season of autumn foliage, ablaze and gorgeous before I return to the earth. For 30 years, I've been fencing the wilderness out of the garden where I grew vegetables in rows straight as typed text, editing beets and beans the way I manipulate words. Then one day I looked up from weeding the carrots and saw the pastoral landscape and into the forest that dominates Vermont. Now, instead of taking comfort in old foundations, stone walls, and logging roads that molder in the woods, I found myself looking beyond the evidence of human endeavor and was alert to live animal signs. It was as if the centrifugal force of the Earth's rotation was forcing me out of the garden, off the blazed trail, away from the civilized use of the outdoors. By learning to hunt, I was spinning into a new orbit. There's a little bit more. I was 28 when I moved to Vermont for the summer and never left. I've now lived more than half my life in this rural state where hunting is ubiquitous. According to the Big Game Management Plan for 2020 to 2030, published by the Vermont Fish and Wildlife Department shortly after I started hunting, Vermont has a hunting participation rate of about 14%, way above the 4% national average. Living among hunters made me curious about hunting. So curious that I once accompanied a hunting friend into the woods with a camera. But this was back when I was still learning how to farm, when I was doing my best to tame the landscape rather than read its wilderness. It was before I knew how to sit still. For the first 30 years that I lived in Vermont, I stayed out of the woods during hunting season. I was never worried a hunter would mistake me for a deer, but I recognized that for the 16 days of rifle season, something primal overtakes these hunters. They need the woods to themselves. Then, as I approached 60, this primal urge overtook me, an urge so strong enough to overcome a lifelong fear of getting lost in the woods, an urge so insistent I would learn to shoot a rifle despite an enduring fear of firearms. When I heard the call to hunt, a voice from the universe vibrated inside me. It was a sensation I couldn't ignore. It would be more than a year between the time I was called to hunt and my first morning in the field. It would be a year of alternating fear, effort, new knowledge, and preparation. Regardless, I knew almost as soon as I was summoned by this force that I can hardly describe that I would write about it, because writing is how I make sense of the world. Somehow, perhaps in the same way that I knew I needed to hunt, I knew I would narrate this story of walking into the woods alone with a rifle in the dark. So, if you don't come from a family where people have hunted probably since before Moses, how do you learn? well, an editor calls you up and says, do you want to go to doe camp? And I say, sure, what's that? And then, as he's telling me what it is, I'm looking it up online. And he's saying, well, you could take advanced Nordic skiing. You could take winter camping. This was winter doe camp, I should mention. And I'm looking and I'm saying, could I take marksmanship? Could I take hunting 101? Could I take critter calling? And he said, well, our audience really isn't the hook and bullet crowd. I'd never heard that term before. And I just waited him out. And he said, well, yeah, if that's what you want to do. Go ahead. That was 10 years ago, to be clear. And so I went to doe camp. And I took hunting 101. And one of the things I learned was that I would have to find a mentor. And I knew exactly who I was going to ask. I'm on the wrong page. No, I'm not. I knew I was going to ask Roger Brown, a man, the first hunter I ever met, I think, a man I met actually before I met my husband, but I didn't know his name until after Tim and I moved in together, because he was the contractor of our house, our old house. So I called him up, and he said, yeah, come on over, we'll talk. So this is my first interview with Roger. I drove up to his house. First we were on the phone. And I should tell you, and I don't think he's here, I haven't seen him. Okay. Roger and his wife Janice are also my longtime fan club. They read everything I write. It's really sweet. So I also told Roger that I didn't just want to learn how to hunt, I wanted to write about it. And he said, if anyone can explain hunting to folks who don't know anything about it, Deb, it's you. Yeah, Roger, that's nice of you to say, but what are the chances I can learn to hunt? You can. I know you can. I've seen you set your mind to do something and do it. Before we hung up, Roger agreed to an interview. He was outside when I drove up into his yard. Roger folded his arms across his chest. Before I was out of the car, he was saying, the first thing you need to know about hunting is tree huggers badmouth hunters. He shook his head at the ground. I leaned against the car door. Teachers badmouth hunting. A lot of people frown on it. He dropped his arms and sighed. But a hunter does more for animals than anyone else. He looked me in the eye. The 29 words, he said, as if I knew what he was talking about. I raised an eyebrow and tilted my head. The 29 words of the Pittman-Robertson Act. Roger was referring to the 1937 law ensuring that hunting fees and taxes support conservation, and recited the 29 words by heart. And which shall include a prohibition against the diversion of license fees paid by hunters for any other purpose than the administration of said state fish and game department. It's the hunters that pay for conservation, not tree huggers. Hunters protect wildlife habitat with an 11% tax on guns and ammunition, and that money can't be spent on nothing else. That's what those 29 words mean. He was frowning. And everybody benefits. People don't pay no special tax on their cameras to shoot pictures of animals. It's hunters who pay. He shook his head at the ground again, then looked me in the face. That's what you're up against, Deb, if you want to hunt. If I'd never left the city, if I'd never met Roger, I'd probably be one of those people who disparage hunters. So, one of the classes I took at Doe Camp was critter calling for hunters and photographers. I became aware of how deaf I had been in the woods. There's a whole lot going on. There's just so much. And if you learn it, you know what's happening. You know that when the crows are the town criers, and when they start cawing, it means they're telling everybody else, hey, there's a lady in the woods with a gun. So, but I've also been a locavore longer than I've been a Vermonter. So I didn't want to just read the landscape. I also wanted to eat it. I've been growing my own food and aware of the carbon footprint of my food and trying to eat as much local food, as much food that remembers the dirt it was grown in than packaged food. So I went out to lunch with my aunt and uncle who were responsible for me being in Vermont. They bought a small little house on Newfane Hill where we spent summers. I would visit them every summer. They were otherwise New York City school teachers. And they were like my better parents, you know, the ones who saw me as their niece and not their daughter. So this is that story. Shortly after returning from dough camp, I met Aunt Joan and Uncle Dave for lunch. So as soon as the server handed us our menus, I started telling Joan and Dave about the critter calling class at dough camp. I learned that deer burp, grunt, and bleat, I said, enthusiastic about my new knowledge. Aunt Joan peered over her menu and snapped, "Did you learn what sound they make when they're shot?" I bet it's a better death than the pig whose bacon you just ordered. And just like that, we were taking sides. I didn't mean to shame her, but I also didn't like being scolded for learning more about the natural world from which we humans are becoming increasingly alienated, even as we're degrading it by what we eat. I said nothing about Aunt Joan's choice of farm shrimp raised in place of factory farm bacon. I'm sure the chickpeas and lettuce in my hummus salad were also exploited laborers and burned fossil fuel on the journey from faraway fields to my restaurant plate. The ethics of food in our industrial age are complex, leaving each of us to make food choices based on an alphabet of attributes from affordability, beliefs, and culture to yeast and zest, for the profound connection to earth and clan that comes from preparing and sharing food. It's this complexity that informs our personal choices, and as with so many other hot-button issues, none of us is consistent or rational, so it pays to be tolerant. I never would have snapped at Aunt Joan for ordering a bacon, lettuce, and tomato sandwich if I hadn't felt attacked for learning about the language of deer or wanting to harvest local, wild, organic meat. We forgave each other. So, like hunting, writing is also an act of discovery. And I lost track of how many drafts there were. I stopped counting at 19. And I had already written several drafts before I met Artemis. And I met Artemis, the goddess of women, childbirth, the hunt, and wildlife. And she's not who I thought she was. And her stories taught me that women have been hunting for at least as long as men. And that I had a right to be in the woods. And that I was also joining a tradition of storytellers by telling this story. So here is what I learned about Artemis. I seem to have been working my way backwards through human history, leaving the city, raising domestic livestock, keeping bees, nurturing an orchard, and cultivating a vegetable garden before making tentative forays into foraging fiddleheads, ramps, and black trumpets. Simultaneously, I have been facilitating book discussions in libraries, giving lectures around the state, and telling stories on the radio, in print, and in cyberspace. Ironically, it's only now that I see how these two activities, hunting and storytelling, are so intimately related. We tell stories to educate, persuade, and entertain, and we now do so over many platforms, from the campfire to the internet. Storytelling is central to human experience. So too is hunting. While we don't know the content of the oldest stories from the oral tradition, I can guess that many of them had to do with the hunt given the number of deities who presided over hunters and hunting, a pantheon that included many goddesses. Artemis is the Greek goddess of wild animals, the wilderness and the hunt, childbirth, child welfare, and chastity. Diana is her Roman counterpart. Both are familiar figures in Eurocentric storytelling, but there are many other ancient goddesses from other traditions. These goddesses were believed to protect the health of the forest and clan, promote fertility, make medicine, and reign over winter, and reign as in a queen, over winter, mountains, and moons. Of all these goddesses, I only knew a little about Artemis, mostly from art, where she's routinely depicted as tall, slim, small-breasted, and fleet, none of which describes me. But as the mother of daughters, I knew how to nurture girls and women. As a gardener, I knew how to care for soil. In becoming a hunter, I would learn about stewardship of the wild. Before Artemis became known in Greek mythology as the virgin goddess of the hunt, she was worshipped at a temple dedicated to her as a goddess who protected women, children, and wildlife. The temple of Artemis at Ephesus dates back to the Bronze Age. Whether the temple was first built by Amazon warriors or other worshippers is uncertain. What is known is that the temple of Artemis served as a place of pilgrimage and worship for both women and men. It was important enough to be rebuilt 3 times, each time more grandly than before. The temple was destroyed by a flood in the 7th century BCE. A second iteration was destroyed by fire, possibly arson, in 356 BCE. The third temple of Artemis at Ephesus was the largest, deemed one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, of which only the Great Pyramid still stands. This third temple, which was larger than the Parthenon, survived into the Common Era and is mentioned in the New Testament. The spread of Christianity and the persecution of pagan worship led to the temple's gradual neglect, aided by Goths, who raided Ephesus in 268 in the Common Era. The Temple of Artemis housed the earliest known sculptural representation of the goddess, a bronze and alabaster figure from the 2nd century BCE. While the original statue is lost, copies of it have been found throughout the ancient world, where Artemis was first worshipped not as the daughter of Zeus, nor the twin sister of Apollo, nor as a virgin, but as the great mother goddess. Across her chest hang spheres, as if she has many breasts, though some scholars insist the spheres represent the testicles of sacrificial bulls. Breasts or balls, the statue is a depiction of female sexuality, fertility, and power. I grew up in a world ruled by a male god in a time when archaeologists had long been operating under the assumption that all prehistoric hunters were male, despite the long lineage of female deities. Recently, though, when archaeologists in Peru dug up a 9,000-year-old skeleton buried with the hunting toolkits of stone projectile points and animal processing tools, they assumed they'd found the remains of a male hunting chief. But the bones and tooth enamel indicate that the skeleton found at the Willamaya Patijaxa site was a female between 17 and 19 years old. Archaeologists are now asking how common it was for women to hunt in pre-Columbian times by reviewing previous assumptions and data. I didn't know many women hunters when I heard the call, nor did I know that women currently make up the fastest growing cohort of hunters in the United States. In fact, I didn't know much. 5 years later, I still have a lot to learn. But when I felt that overwhelming physical sensation, as if gravity were pulling me sideways into the forest, when I heard that unbidden and unmistakable call to hunt, I answered it. And this is my story. All right, I will answer questions. Ruth?
What is doe camp?
Oh. Doe camp is a weekend school for adventurous women. And there are volunteers with expertise who teach women who sign up and come for 3 days. All sorts of things. Ruth came with me, actually. Busted. And we rode in a dog sled. We took the hunting course. Hope someday to teach my daughter to hunt, to take her out with me. Any one of them, any one of my daughters. Let's see, I did marksmanship. I don't know what you did that morning. Did you do, you also? Okay. I was so focused on the target, I don't remember anything else. And I did the critter calling, and I also took an axe skills class, which was really interesting, mostly because I learned all the words for the many parts of an axe, which otherwise look like a simple machine, but they have a lot of parts and really cool names, none of which I could recall right now, so don't ask. And it was a lot of fun. There were some women who come every year. This group of teachers from Middlebury come every year, and there were people who came from up and down the eastern seaboard, all ages, although I think I was probably the oldest one. Anyway, it was fun. There was a cooking class. There was a woman, I met a woman who was actually a neighbor of my brother's in New York City, in Scarsdale, actually. And she had never slept outside in a tent before, and she did. She was very empowered. So that's what doe camp is. And any other questions? Sure. Yeah, Susan.
I don't know if this is going to come out right, but I'll give it a shot.
Sure.
I don't mean that as a joke. Okay. What's it like to kill an animal?
That's usually the first question.
Oh, good. Okay.
Well, you've probably swatted a mosquito. I've raised pigs with my husband and slaughtered them, and I have raised chickens. Every year we raise chickens and we slaughter them ourselves. And I eat meat, so I feel obligated to be able to do this. And it's different to kill a wild animal. At a different learning experience, I also went to the Huntress intensive, where I had a second mentor. And there, it was a weekend with 6 other women, and one of them was a 16-year-old woman from Montana who had actually, the only one of us who had actually been hunting, and she said, I think it's immoral to raise an animal for slaughter. She only ate wild meat, which was to me like mind-boggling to think. I had never thought about that before. So what is it like? It's an enormous responsibility. So I've now shot 2 deer, each with a single bullet. They were very close. I couldn't miss. I probably could have, but I didn't. The first one dropped dead. The second one went a short way, out of sight. And I waited. You're supposed to not follow it, just let it die. And then I followed the blood trail as I've been taught. And I'm so nervous about getting lost in the woods that I'm leaving little tape on the trees, 40 pieces in 30 yards, you know? And the blood trail stops, and I think, oh, I had that moment of, and this is not in the book, because this is the second deer. And I thought, I have a responsibility. If I can't find this deer, I can't ever hunt again. So I decided, okay, I can see where I was sitting, where I took the shot. I'm going to circle around and start over. And I turned, and there was the deer. Mm-hmm. The blood trail stopped because the deer was on the ground. So, last November, I saw an 8-point buck. And he was in my sights. He was actually in my sight for quite a long time. I watched him approach, turn broadside, perfect shot. But there were some little, as in Vermont woods, there was some little brush in the way. And I wasn't sure my bullet would kill him in a single shot. So I watched him make a scrape and pee in it and rub his antlers against a tree. That's his tinder. I'm here. And he walked off. And I was good with that. So it's a big thing. But I also have sex on my side. So the first buck, the buck in the book, he was chasing a doe. He was not paying attention to me. and he dropped dead, like that. The other buck, I think, was smoking a cigarette after his first time. He was so gobsmacked. He was just standing there. And so I shot him. And then, the really wonderful part of this is that I have been able to share this animal's flesh with family and friends and tell the story again and again. So I was raised Jewish, where we believe that the dead live on in the memories of the living, and these deer live on in my memory and the memory of the people who I feed it to. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Holly.
That was a beautiful explanation, thank you. I have a two-part question.
Okay.
One is you said you'd never shot a gun before, so were you a good shot right away, or was that a challenge? And then that was a beautiful explanation of a encounter with wildlife. Have you had other interesting encounters in the woods?
Okay. The first question is, at doe camp, I thought, okay, this could just end it. And you're going to like this answer. She's my yoga teacher. My yoga training has made me a really good shot. At doe camp, I shot several .22s. The M1, which is the rifle my father carried in World War II in Europe. And I shot an AK-47, which is just an awful thing, but I hit the bullseye every time. So I couldn't quit. And your second question was, in the book, you'll have to read it. I had a magical encounter with charismatic megafauna. And that's all I'm going to tell you. Yeah, Stevie.
First, since you would like the animal to drop dead immediately, what is your target that if you succeed, you hit and that happens?
The heart and lungs.
Okay, so at a particular place where you know exactly.
Yeah, just behind the front, the foreleg that's extended.
Okay, and second question is the animal sounds. Is that vocal, or is that with some variation of a kazoo or some animal tool?
Oh, you mean, I haven't ever used them. I am what's known as a sustenance hunter, and I'm also trying very hard to be a low-tech hunter. And I broke down and bought a game cam, which has been absolutely useless except for spying on my neighbors who walk on my land. I try to go out with a lot of clothes. I've added a pee funnel to my backpack, which really makes it possible to pee without having to get undressed, and a great invention. And I carry a knife, some medical gloves and rags. That's it. You know, food, water. I haven't used calls. I'm not particularly interested in antlers, just except that it be a legal deer. And I'm very interested in it being a legal buck if I'm out with my, I've since become a bow hunter as well. So I can take anything with a bow. If I ever saw one when I was out with my bow, I could take it, in theory. But I haven't ever used any of those calls. And maybe I should, but it's so nice. So I didn't realize how much I had suffered from seasonal affective disorder until I started hunting, because I'm now out in the woods from before sunrise until noon. That's more sunlight in the morning when you need it than I'd get if I were just indoors and during November, which is when you sort of go inside for a few months. So being outdoors, whether you see a deer or a bear, which I haven't seen yet, which is okay, or a porcupine, which I have seen, whatever you see, it's just wonderful. You smell things, you watch things, they're birds, you see birds, chipmunks, all that sort of thing. Yeah. Alex.
How long were you hunting before success, and did you get discouraged?
It was 4 years before I shot the book who is featured and lives in this book. So it was my 4th year in the field.
Wow.
I have trouble with that success. The way I have trouble saying, oh, that measuring success with money. It's like, yeah. So it's just a success. It's a semantic thing. But here, so it was 4 years, and your second question was?
Well, just whether you got discouraged being out there.
Daily. And even when it wasn't hunting season. I have spent most of my life discouraged. I am having a lot of trouble adjusting to having this book in the world. Diana.
I was so struck that there's this lineage of women, ancient women hunters, and I feel like there's been a collective erasure of that history.
Kind of like the Bible.
Yeah. So, given that, and I don't want to get too cynical because this is just such a wonderful and exciting topic, but it sounded like you found a wonderful mentor in Roger. But did you experience, as a woman hunter now in the 21st century, have you experienced misogyny or sexism, like women aren't capable of it? Any kind of pushback within your immediate experience or larger? Was it all what you've talked about just sounds incredibly supportive and encouraging.
It has been incredibly encouraging and supportive. What writing this book has done, it did teach me how internalized I've internalized sexism, and it's been really shocking and hard to, it's also hard to eradicate from my body and self, but writing this book, telling this story has helped. Hunters have a terrible rap. And I've never met those hunters, but I'm scared of them when I'm in the woods. But I also am wearing so many layers of clothing, I feel slightly impervious and protected. But it took me a long time. It really wasn't until Artemis came to my side that I felt like I belonged in the woods. And that was really, and that didn't happen until after I shot this first deer. So that came from writing and storytelling. And the stories, and reading the stories of Artemis, none of which, in translation from the first, Greek and Roman translations to Paxton to current time until recently, were all translated by men. So they starred the men, which now we're doing it differently. Any other? Yeah.
What do your daughters think of your hunting?
Well, there's one there. Oh, she's gone. She's gone. Sorry, she had to leave early. So they're all for it, and not only my daughters, but my granddaughter, who is going to be 9 in a couple of weeks. When she was going to be 7 in a couple of weeks, it's 2 or 3 years ago, maybe 21. It's 4 years ago. She helped. She was very interested and helped butcher my second deer. So I have incredible support from my family for this, including my long-suffering husband. Yeah, okay. And then I think we're going to have to, let me look at my thing. Yeah, these 3. Go ahead, please.
Would you ever consider joining the board of Fish and Game? I would love to have your voice on that important body.
Possibly.
Yeah, I think that you would balance out a lot of the testosterone. Plus you bring a goddess with you.
I bring a goddess with me. I would consider it. Right now, I am incredibly busy. This is so disruptive to my writing life, marketing a book. And I have my first novel, Into the Wilderness, will be reissued in April. So that was the book I presented here 15 years ago. And so I'll be doing that. I'm trying hard to finish a book that I put aside when I started writing this one, when I knew that I was going to be hunting. So, but thank you for that vote of confidence. Peter?
Yeah, it's sort of a presumptuous thing. It's more like a comment. You know, this seems to me to be like the book that you were always meant to write. You know, how does that feel?
I'm so surprised that I wrote a memoir. And I'm so grateful for what I've learned in the process. Not just about hunting, but about my family of origin and my brothers and just, so much. And then there's a lot about death in here, and I see a lot of my friends who work in death who are here. And, and it's about killing an animal. But there's also, during the course of the book, my friend who I hiked the long trail with, who's 5 days younger than me, died suddenly. And my father died expectedly at 94. And I talk about guns, which I am a gun owner and believe that we need much better rules about guns like we have for cars, that people should have to pass a test to own one. They should have to have liability insurance. That would make people put them away properly and not leave them around loaded for kids to pick up. I have 2 friends who killed themselves with handguns. So, Leonard, you're going to be the last one.
How do you get a deer out of the woods?
Well, it's one of my great concerns always. For my 2 deer that I've gotten, I call Ruth and Ian, but I can't do that anymore. My daughter and son-in-law, but now they're too busy working. They were studying at the time. They were able to get away, but I can't. Ian doesn't work in Brattleboro anymore, and Ruth is working all the time. So I drag it. I have names of friends I can call. I have so much support from people in the community for being a hunter. And I have their phone numbers, their cell phone numbers. And I have, call me. And I'm thinking, how will you find me? And they will. All right. I am going to go sign books. But before I do that, before I leave here, I would like you to know that first of all, thank you for coming. I have an ask. I have 3 requests. read the book, tell your friends about the book, and post a review on Amazon. I'm really sorry, it has to be Amazon, but it does. That will help. Thank you.